So here we are. I did say on weekly we weren't doing it because, we've managed to do it. The commitment of Mr. Lingard, absolutely outstanding. How are you, mate? You okay?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
I'm absolutely marvellous, mate. Thank you very much indeed for asking. Let's get into Championship Rugby League. Of course, 1895 Cup has just been and gone. Before we go there, though, bit of news. North Wales, again, from a Championship perspective, another club that appears to be in financial difficulty at this time. Before the ball was kicked, could you have foreseen what's gone on this year?
No, I mean there were little bits of things happening behind the scenes, weren't they, at the start of the season where they weren't paying players and players who were contracted there at the end of last season and not received the last month or a couple of months' wages, and that rumbled on a little bit on social media with certain players who had played there. But you were hoping that were going to be cleared up and it were going to be all sorted out for the start of the season, and especially with the new owners coming in, I think there were quite a little bit of positivity around it and expecting the club to start building and moving forward, especially with the people that they've brought in as well to work behind the scenes off the field. You know, there was some big names that they brought in, and you're hoping that there were a bit of positivity there and looking forward, but it just doesn't seem to have happened. And with everything that's happened in the last sort of month to 6 weeks, it just looks like it's doomed to failure now, unfortunately. And I hope that's not the case, but I'd be very, very surprised if anything changes.
Yeah, of course, they backed out of the game at the weekend, and they did actually say that was to prioritise this week. But reading between the lines, it does have the feeling that this is a big problem.
Yeah, it does, and I'm led to believe that as of midnight last night, that all players have become free agents because of breach of contracts. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty positive that that's the case, and I would imagine that we'll see a number of North Wales players signing for other teams over the next sort of 24, 48 hours before the deadline for the weekend. So I think if that happens, then is there any way back for North Wales to fulfil a fixture next week and moving forward?
Yeah, and then obviously from a league perspective, there's then are we going to points percentage? Because obviously unlike Featherstone, and of course we had the Halifax issue as well, albeit Halifax of course could still catch up on those fixtures potentially, which brings with it, the safety of the players that you spoke about before, in terms of that wouldn't sit right in terms of the part-time players having to maybe play 3 games in a week. But that's not beyond the realms of possibility. Whereas if North Wales were to not be able to fulfil the rest of the fixtures, it would probably have to go to points percentage, wouldn't it?
You would have thought so at this stage of the season. Yeah, I can't see where they're going to make fixtures up. But then what happens to the games that North Wales have already played? Are them results just totally expunged from the current campaign? The points for, points against, the stats that people have already currently got. And this is, again, it's easy to say it now and it's difficult to change it now, but it goes back to the point for me that I'm not a fan of this current system. I think from me as an individual, I think you need to play everybody home and away. And if that's the case, and if something like this does happen, it's a lot easier to sort out and rectify. But now we're playing different teams, and some teams are playing North Wales, some teams aren't. So obviously at Sheffield, we don't play North Wales, so it doesn't really affect us in terms of the league campaign. But other teams it does, but it has a massive impact on fixtures that you play and fixtures that you don't play.
Yeah, no, it's a big headache, and I know that you hadn't seen it before because literally we got together a few minutes before recording. But also Widnes Stadium is up for review. Halton Council looking to get a buyer for Widnes Stadium. That'll concern the Widnes fans as well, I would have thought.
It's a massive worry. It really, really is. And if it does happen, who's going to take over the stadium? Then you've got whoever it is that comes in, and you've got renegotiations, and you could go. Of course, it could be something that they might just completely get rid of the stadium and build houses on there. I don't know what the situation in terms of planning and applications in that respect. And I think this is again part of the issue that you've got when you don't own your own ground. You're reliant on the landlords, and they can price you out of it. And if they want to kick you out, they can kick you out. And I think that's a big issue, I guess, sport-wide and rugby league-wide, is if your ground's not there, where do you play? So it's a massive immediate issue for Widnes.
Yeah, I mean, it does read as if Widnes don't need to be too worried. They're not looking at selling it to the point where it will be knocked down and all the rest of it. I mean, there's been a few quotes that have come out where they've said they see it as being run by the football club, by the rugby league club. But we've seen this elsewhere, and sometimes that can go a little bit belly up, can't it? So I understand why Widnes fans will be concerned, but hopefully, not so much. But again, we're just living in a time at the moment where, with what's going on in the second tier of rugby league, and of course all the talk around what's going on in the Super League, it just feels at the moment that does it feel the same for you, that we're almost at a watershed type moment in the game?
Yeah, I think so. And just going back to the Widnes situation, I know that other clubs are in the same situation where the tenants are at ground, and then you've effectively got to adhere to the conditions that your landlord puts upon you. You've got to have their security. That you're not potentially bringing in your own finances for bar takings and food takings, and the rent can go up, it can change, the terms and conditions can change. So there's a lot of insecurity in and around that. But yeah, I certainly agree. I think we're in a bit of a watershed moment for the sport at this minute, and I think the next sort of 6 to 12 months could have a massive impact on where the game needs to go and potentially will go in the next decade or so.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, that Salford comes to mind in terms of what happened at their stadium, in terms of not being able to generate cash from self-generated things, and that's a problem. I think Oldham as well. A part of the Oldham problem was that as well, wasn't it? A similar type of thing.
At this moment in time, we're in a similar situation at Sheffield, playing at the stadium that we play at the OLP or Steel City Stadium, whichever name it's going by now. That we've got to adhere to the terms and conditions that are put on you by your landlord. So we've got to use their security. We've got generating funds and income on game day through the bars and through the food outlets is difficult because they're not yours. So where you should be able to generate income when it's your home game, but with the terms and conditions that are put on you, you're not currently quite allowed to do that.
No, and just while I've got, I mean, I know that again we spoke just before we went on there that you didn't see the Andrew Abdo. I keep getting it wrong. Abdo interview on Sky. But as a Championship manager and somebody who loves this game passionately like you do, of course, your life has been invested in the great game that is rugby league. If you could have a wish for the game, what would you hope this investment looks like for the game as a whole, including Championship and grassroots? What would you hope would be a part and a factor of what's going on?
I think it's a difficult one for me. There's lots of different things in and around the game that need to get better, and it's where do you start? It's the chicken and the egg. What comes first, and does something need to happen before the other thing happens? I think for me, the issue for me as a sport for a number of years has been a lack of household names in rugby league, a lack of vision on the TV, and I would imagine that anybody outside of rugby league, if you stop them in the street and you say, "Name me a rugby league player," the majority of people will still be naming Martin Afire, they'll still be naming Ella Rihanna, they'll still be naming Sean Edwards or whoever it might be. You won't get many people that'll be naming maybe a Bevan French or a Mikey Lewis or something like that. So there's no role models out there at the minute. Everybody wants to be a footballer. Everybody wants to be a Premier League footballer. Everybody, you turn up to one of my kids plays football now. You turn up to his game and you've got kids that are 11-year-old wearing the socks above the knees because they're seeing people in the Premier League wearing the socks above the knees. Why, I have no idea, but they're seeing that on TV and they're replicating that on TV. And we need to get rugby league back into the eyes of the people, back into people's living rooms, where it's not on a specialised channel where you've got to search on a red button or you've got to search through God knows how many. Channel 900 and whatever it might be to get rugby league on your TV. So we need to get rugby league back in people's homes. We need to start people wanting to be rugby league players again. And again, going back to me being a young kid playing the game, there were hundreds and hundreds of amateur teams and junior teams where people were playing. And the amount of amateur teams now that have stopped playing rugby league. So there's a lack of places for people to play. And I guess a lot of that's down to the lifestyle that we've got now and the world as a whole. Every single pub team in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even going back decades, every pub team had a rugby league team. and there's a lack of pubs now there where people aren't socialising. People are socialising away from a public house environment. So it's just having the access for people to play. So we need to get people playing back in schools. There's very few, I guess, junior schools, infant schools, primary schools, that you want to call them now, that play rugby league.
Yeah,
I go back to being 7, 8 year old at Charleston Junior Infant School. We played rugby league every single week. There's very, very few schools now that at that age at primary school that will play rugby league, because it's a contact sport and they don't want people playing contact sports. Yeah. So we need to get rugby league being played again by young kids, and it's not going to be something that's going to be solved in a 1 or 2 year cycle. There's got to be a plan. It's got to be a 5 year step and a 10 year step and a 20 year step to see where we want to take the game to start growing. Because you can't grow the sport overnight. It's got to be done over a period of time, and there's got to be a plan in place, and they've got to stick to it. And it's got to be something concrete, and you can't do what rugby league always seems to do, is they'll have a plan for 6 months or 12 months and they change it again. And it needs to be well thought out.
Well, that's my hope, because what we do know about the NRL is that their business model and what they've achieved down there suggests they know exactly what they're doing, and it's about replicating. You don't break what isn't broken. So to bring that in, hopefully we will get a bit of that. But I know you haven't watched it. I would to say to you, watch The Bench with Jenna Brooks, because there's an extended interview with him on that. And anybody, and I appreciate there'll be people who watch this that are very Championship led, because that's where your heart is, because that's where your club is. But again, if you actually listen to that interview, it is available as a podcast. It does get, I got the feeling off the back of it that there is absolutely one eye on the second tier and also on grassroots rugby league. They actually use New Zealand as an example, and not coming from that part of the world, you don't really know the ins and outs of what goes on, but they use New Zealand as an example of how they've grown the game in New Zealand, not only in terms of through the Warriors, but through I think he was saying that more people now play rugby league in New Zealand than Union. I think he was saying at one point. So they've clearly got a blueprint that has worked in Australia. Of course, they're going to new territories now, Perth, etc. They're going to Papua New Guinea. I got a lot of heart from it. Of course, there's still a lot of questions, but for the first time, we got from the horse's mouth not only an interest, but also a wider interest in the game in British Rugby League. And I, for one, was delighted to hear that. So have a listen, mate, and let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you will. Let's get into the 1895 Cup. Some big wins. Widnes 50. We can talk about Widnes earlier on, but hey, at least on the field, it went well from this weekend. A 50 points to 10 win at Dewsbury. They'll be pleased with that. Connall getting a hat-trick.
Yeah, he's gone real well this year, hasn't he? Whether he's playing full-back or whether he's playing on the wing or on the edge is a bit of a find, isn't he? I guess he's one that benefited from the situation at Salford last year, getting some first-team rugby, getting himself in the picture, in the limelight, and earned the contract at Widnes, and he's kicked on massively. And I think he's been one of the finds of the season in the Championship this year.
Yeah, and there's more hat-tricks to go around as well, mate. Doncaster 64, Salford 0, Holmesy got 3. So a very comfortable win. But and we expected that. Donny doing well, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I think them and London, the top two teams of the division. I think that'll be an interesting game this weekend. And I'm jumping forward, and also in the quarterfinals of the 1895 Cup, I think that'll be a real good indicator about where Doncaster are, because obviously we know how good London are, but Doncaster have been outstanding so far this season. I think barring the Midlands game, which they lost, I think they'll be really pleased with how they've played and performed this season. So I guess this weekend will be a real good indicator for them. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you look at the for and against the Donny, 317 points scored this season out of their 8 games, only conceding 92. That's good going. I mean, when you compare and contrast that, London scoring a lot more, 455, but 70 again. So the defence is strong, isn't it? 92, only 92 conceded in 8 games, and of course, none conceded in this game at the weekend just gone. Wins are built on defence, and at the moment, Donny's defence looks good.
It does, yeah. And I think you look at the fixtures as well. I think London have played a vast majority of their games at home so far as well, so they've not travelled too much. And I guess Doncaster, I'm not sure what their percentage of home and away games is, but I would imagine it'll be fairly 50-50. So they're travelling well, they're playing well at home, and I guess we'll see once London start travelling continuously, maybe week on week, will that impact on their performances? We're not having home advantage and having the teams that are travelling down to London. I doubt it too much, but I guess that'll be something that we need to watch out for in the future.
Absolutely, no, and as you say, we'll get to the round. What are we on? 11 officially. I'm trying to think. I think it's round 11 officially.
12, something like that.
Yeah. We'll get to that game in a bit. Gould Vikings, good win this for Gould. I mean, Gould have been having it tough, haven't he? Got off to a decent start, really struggling with results. So a 40 points to 10 win in the cup against Whitehaven, that'll make Gould smile, won't it?
Yeah, I think it will. I think they've swapped the cup game for the League 2 points last week, but we talked about this, didn't we? When it chucks up a game after you've played them in the league, you play them in the cup, and they've reversed that around. So as you mentioned there, we talked about Gould saying that they probably needed a victory to get some confidence back in the group and back in the camp after a real positive start to the season. So they can take that into the coming weeks now, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. London 62, Keighley 6 at London. Quite a few try scorers as well for London on the day. They spread the love around a little bit. Roro got a couple though. He got a brace. O'Burney got 2 as well, as did Max. So there's a couple of braces in there, no hat-tricks. But again, we expected London to come through that unscathed, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And I think looking at London's team as well, I think they got the 2 starting centres back as well on the field, which have been missing for a number of weeks. So they're getting stronger and stronger and getting the bodies back as the season progresses. So there don't seem to be any let up from London, does there? No,
there doesn't, to be fair. They're doing very, very well indeed. We go to Newcastle Batley. That was a game. That was a game, 34 points to 20. Got to give a shout out to Brad Ward. 4 tries. Good effort, that.
It is, yeah. And this was a game that I weren't too sure about. I think we maybe just tipped Newcastle with home advantage. I think we're unsure what sort of team Newcastle would have been able to select based on York and their injuries, but they've got that home field advantage, I guess. They travel up for Batley, and I think we just sort of picked that one just right. I think based on the home advantage, but really positive result for Newcastle.
Oldham 72, Hunslet 24. That's a big win. That was a big margin for Oldham. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, it was 18 all at half time, wasn't it? So they scored
second half.
A hell of a lot of points in the second half, and I think we're seeing. I think Hunslet only took 16 players that game as well. I think they couldn't get a squad of 17, and this is, I guess, the conversation that we had last week where we're talking about the reliance at times on loan players coming in. If you don't get them loan players coming in, it can significantly impact on your squad that you've got or the team that you're selecting. And Hunslet didn't have the loan players last week, and they're another team, like a number of teams that are struggling with missing players through injuries long term as well. And it's an impact sport wide at the minute. And obviously Hunslet have felt that impact this week. We haven't been able to select 16 players.
Absolutely. And come on, here we go. We finally got to your game. 32 points to 18. I know you've been doing it tough injury-wise. 10-8 lead, though, at half-time. You were in the grind at 40 minutes, and then, obviously, second half, Rochdale went out winners. Your thoughts on your game?
I thought Rochdale deserved it. I really did. I thought we started the game well. We were 10-0 up inside 10 minutes, and we made a bit of a focus this week on our 10-minute period at the start of the game and 10-minute period at the start of the second half, because statistically that's been our worst period, where we've not scored as many points and we've conceded more points. So we put a real focus on the first 10 minutes of each half, and we won the first 10 minutes 10-0, and then we forgot about the 30 minutes after that, and exactly the same in the second half. We started really well in the second half, forgot about the 30 minutes after that as well. I thought we had a lot of possession and field position in the opponent's 20-metre area. We didn't really struggle too much getting down to the 20-metre area, but just a lack of inexperience, a lack of game management in the final quarter of the field, where we just didn't really trouble them enough. And then as the game wore on and Rochdale got a little bit of possession, the butchered our left-hand side defence. Jamie Dallimore, Jack Hansen controlled the game real well, and they scored some very, very good tries and ran out deserved winners. So disappointing for us to I guess crumble in the last sort of 20-25 minutes as we did. After the season, we started the season really well defensively, but I think we struggled missing Matty Marsh. Again, looking at some stats, when Marsh had played, we were only conceding in the league, we'll keep conceding less than 10 points a game, and since Marsh has been out, we've conceded over 30 points a game. So losing that pivotal player at fullback. Everybody thinks about Matty Marsh as being a great attacking player, but defensively he's outstanding, getting the numbers right. Certainly on goal line, moving people where they need to be, his positioning behind the line as well. And I think we're missing that specialist player in that position at the minute, and we're having to play a winger at fullback, and then losing the impact that Joe Brown can give us on the wing as well. So yeah, it's difficult at the minute, but you can't change anything. Trying to get people in and rotate people around and move people to different positions and deal with it as best we can. But we seem to get a couple of people back and then lose a couple of people. So we've lost Alex Foster this week, and Kieran Gill, he's gone as well. So we get a couple of people back that missed this week, but lose another couple as well.
I mean, I know you want to win every game that you compete in, and I get that. But with your current injury concerns, do you see this as a blessing or absolutely not? You don't want it to keep going forward in the cup.
Yeah, you want to win every game that you're involved in as a coach, as a player, and I guess for me, looking at it from a point of view of the league campaign, I would have preferred to lose that game than lose a league game.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to sound defeatist, but I would much prefer to win this week than win last week. With the number of people that we've got out, I think we had eight people out this week. So it's been a real struggle, and it's not just the games where you're affected as well, because when the players are out, you can't get on the training field, so your training's impacted. You can't build the connections, you can't build the understanding, you can't get that fluidity that you need to get in. So everybody sees what happens on the Sunday, which I 100% get, but it impacts on your Tuesday, Thursday, Friday sessions as well, because you can't get people on the field. And the Tuesday sessions at the minute, it's a little bit like a scene from Casualty. We've got that many people that sat on the sidelines on the bench getting treatment, and we're trying to get people out on the training field, and we're struggling to get 14, 15, 16 bodies out on the park to build them connections and build that understanding, which again impacts on what you need to do in training, because you can't do too much contact in training because you're losing that many players. It is that you're trying to wrap players up in cotton wool, so they're not battle hardened for the game on the Sunday as well. So it's getting the right balance of what you need to do in training, but also not doing too much so you're not injuring more people to get them out on the field on the Sunday. Yeah,
you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because you said about contacts in training and being battle hardened for the weekend. It's one of them, and you're trying to protect them, but then you're also exposing them. It must be, as a coach, you say you don't really know, do you? I mean, it's such a fine line, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I think, with Alex Foster, he was out for a number of weeks, and he came back and he played against London last week in his first game back, and he played against Rochdale this week and went off injured with an hamstring strain, and that's probably just due down to the overload of him coming back too quickly. But it's needs must, and unfortunately, probably bringing Fozzie back and playing him too many minutes too soon has impacted on him. We're probably going to lose him for 2 or 3 weeks again now. But it's like we had 17 fit players who played rugby league, and his 18th man was Jamie Cook, who's not played a game of rugby league in his life. He's come over from rugby union, so it is that needs must. And unfortunately, we're probably pushing some people a little bit too far, which is having a bit of a negative impact on their availability for further games in the future. So, and I'm not saying that to make it sound like a woe is me story, because there's a lot of other clubs that are struggling as well. It's just a fact. It's just that reality where we are at the minute, and I guess where the game is. It's game wide. It's every division. You look at Bradford in the situation that they're currently in injuries wise. It's game wide at this moment in time. And why is it happening this year? Why have all forms, all levels of the game got so many injuries? Is it a coincidence? Is it because the rucks are being sped up? Is it because the players are too fit now, and the human body can only deal with so much stress and strain? I don't know. It's one of them things that maybe we need to have a look at and do a little bit of research on, but that's not going to be something that's going to be discovered overnight.
Yeah, like I say, it's all levels, isn't it? It's all levels that we're seeing it. I mean, it was interesting. We have, I don't know if you've seen it. We'll do the draw in a minute, but we have a young lad on. I'll get your take on this. We have a young lad on Super League Raw Weekly called Little Ollie. What would Oliver say? And he sends us a question in every week for a minute, and he's only 12. Honestly, great knowledge, great knowledge. And what he was saying this week was around the loan system this year, and as a 12-year-old, he said he was finding it very difficult in terms of not necessarily the loans down to the Championship, but the interloaning that's going on at Super League level. The Bill Leylands to Saints, etc. He said he's finding the concept of that really tough because I can't remember his actual words now, but he basically was saying about just that little bit about Is it right? Is it fair? Should we be doing that?
Yeah.
You know, should they be blooding their own youngsters? You know, in terms of bringing their own players through, as opposed to bringing players in like a Bill Lake. So he was challenging Saints to blood your own, which is a bit unfair because they are blooding a lot of their own at the moment. So sort of get, but in his world, it was almost like, well, no, you promote from within before you bring in talent across. What, if you were answering little Ollie as a coach, what would you say?
It depends on what side of the fence I'm on. As a coach, it's results driven. You know, it's a cutthroat business and it's results driven. So you want to get the best players in that you can possibly get in to try and impact and try and affect the game where you're going to get the 2 points. So ultimately, as a coach, you want the best players on the field. For me, as an individual, I'm not a massive fan of 7-day loans. I don't think it's right. We got rid of the dual reg system because we didn't believe in the fairness, I guess, of the dual reg system. But effectively, what we've got now is we've got rid of the dual reg system from club to club, but we've brought in a game-wide dual reg now where you can get any player for 7 days. You can sign a player on loan for a season, but it's a 7-day recall. So effectively, you're loaning people for 7 days. I personally believe that a loan should have a minimum period of 4 weeks. And then you're either committing to that player's development to go out and play at another Super League club, at a Championship club and stay there for 4 weeks. If you're not willing to commit to that because you want to bring them back and play a reserve game and then send them out the week after to play a Championship game, or you don't want to send anybody out just in case you get some injuries and you want to keep them at your club, that's fine. But for me, if you're sending people out on loan, it's got to be for a minimum of 4 weeks. And then you're committing to that development of that player or getting that player some game time. That's me as an individual. But as a coach, if I can get an outstanding player for 7 days and I know I'm only going to have him for one game, then I'm probably going to take him. You know, so,
especially now.
It's a bit like Wurzel Gummidge. I'll take one head off and put another head on, depending what I need or what my opinion is.
No, mate, it makes sense. But again, this is what goes back to the discussions over the Australian structure, which we've spoke about before, and I think that would tidy things up quite considerably if that type of structure came into the British game. But
yeah, and I think going back to the conversation we had earlier about the Championship and some of the worries that were potentially there, I think that's maybe one of the main worries that supporters of Championship clubs have got. It's what's going to happen to my team. Am I just going to be now watching a feeder team? And however realistic it is for teams outside of Super League, or I guess 90% of teams now outside of Super League, effectively having that ambition or that reality of getting to Super League, it might not be there. You're still a standalone team. You are still unique. You are still you. If you then join forces, for example, with a Super League club and you become effectively a feeder team, do you lose your identity? Would that mean that certain people would stop watching that team because what is the point now? I'm now just a feeder team. And I know that you can look at, like I mentioned before, you can look at Redcliffe Dolphins in the NRL now. They are there now as a standalone team on their own merit, but they were a feeder team for a number of years to Brisbane Broncos. You know, so there is the avenue there for teams to do it as long as you've got that strategic plan and that financial backing and that wherewithal there to develop your own facilities, your own infrastructure, your own finances, your own team, that you can do it over a long-term period. So I don't see it as a negative if you do join forces with a Super League team and then you become effectively their feeder team or reserve team. But there is still an ambition there for you to get better and develop yourself.
These conversations will keep coming around. It's interesting times. Of course, let's just have a quick look at the draw for the 1895 Cup quarterfinals. We've got that on screen, and what a beauty. Yeah, I mean, London Doncaster. We're going to get, of course, part one this weekend with regards to that. As fixtures go, I mean, as probably as tough as it's going to get for London. So that's going to be interesting to see how that one pans out. Rochdale and Goole will go head to head. Oldham take on Midland. That's got the potential of being a good game. And Widnes against Newcastle. I mean, to be fair, they're all four of them should be competitive games for me. Yeah,
they should. And I think you could say that every game there could potentially be a toss of the coin. You know, depending on who turns up on the day, there's no team there where you can say that they are significantly better than the team that they're playing. And I think it all depends on the day, and it could be a toss of the coin on who goes through.
Yeah, well, obviously we'll be keeping a close eye on that when it comes round in a few weeks' time. But yeah, as draws go, that has got it's a mouth-watering 4 fixtures there in the 1895. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, one game this weekend, round 5 in round 10. Anyway, we won't go there. But the round 5 fixture between Barrow and Halifax. Barrow 26, Halifax 20. Competitive Halifax, but came up against a very, very good Barrow side that now go back to second. Of course, they overtook Midland Hurricanes, having beaten Halifax at the weekend. A good game, which Halifax led 14-4 at half-time.
Yeah, again, as I said, Halifax, they're doing it tough, aren't they, players-wise, and they're working week to week to get people in and get a 17 on the field. But as I've said a number of times, that regardless of which 17 go out there, it's still a very, very strong Halifax team. And I think what they're doing very, very well is that they're having that siege mentality, the backs to the wall, and they're sticking together, and they're putting in some really good performances. And to go up to Barrow as they have done and put in a performance like that and just narrowly lose, I think it's credit to them. But Barrow just keep getting better and better, don't they? You know, I think Barrow always do this. Start real well at the start of the season. I guess the challenge for them is, can they maintain that into the second half of the season and into the playoffs at the business end of the campaign? And that's what they'll be looking at doing. And I think we've mentioned it before about Barrow. They always seem to start very well at the start of the season because the rotation of players in key positions at Barrow is very, very minimal. You know, you look at their spine, their 1, 6, 7, 9, 13. It's not changed a great deal over the last sort of 3, 4, 5 seasons. And having that continuity there and that understanding that other teams, when they bring in new halfbacks in or bring in new fullbacks in or bring in 9s or a 13, and it can take a little bit of time for that understanding to develop and get there. But I think Barrow managed their squad really, really well and developed that understanding over a long-term period.
Yeah, third best defence currently in the Championship, Barrow, doing it well in that respect. Without doubt, we may as well stay there because, of course, that's the opening fixture this weekend. They go off to Newcastle at 4 o'clock this Saturday. Interesting, this one. I mean, it's one thing Newcastle beating Batley. This is a tougher, sterner test against Barrow at home. We always say every week, the York factor. But with it being a home game for Newcastle, sort of levels this up a little bit. This is a proper toss of the coin job, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I guess what we'll potentially see on this one is that because of how the fixtures are decided at the start of the season and Newcastle being Team 21, you know, I don't want to use the term easier fixture list, but positional wise from last season, they have got the more favourable fixture list than what Barrow have. Have Barrow been playing stronger teams and getting wins and getting battle hardened and playing these competitive games week in, week out? Have Newcastle been tested enough on a regular basis for them to be ready to come up against Barrow at the top of the table? That's a question that I guess will be answered on Saturday.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and this is what's making it fascinating now, isn't it? As these things start to evolve in the Championship, you really will start to see who are the movers and shakers. I think we've got a reasonable handle on who are the movers and shakers, but these things will certainly clarify that in everybody's minds. Batley go up against Goole. These Sunday's only one 2 o'clock kickoff, and that's Swinton against Keighley. The rest are 3 o'clock this Sunday. Batley taking on Goole. Goole, of course, great win against Whitehaven. They'll want to try and take that form into the league, but they're off to Batley, who sit just above them in the league table. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, another close one. I'd probably tip slightly towards Batley on this one. Home field advantage. You know, I think that might play a role in this one. I think Batley obviously lost against Salford in the last round, in the last league round, so they'll be looking at bouncing back. And I'm just going to tip slightly with my Batley hat on, just towards Batley at home.
You've got it, mate. You wouldn't be allowed back if you didn't. Doncaster, London. We said about 3 or 4 weeks ago, anybody who takes a scalp off London this year would be heroic. And I sort of feel that, no disrespect to London, but around the league, I think everybody's willing everybody on maybe a little bit to get that scalp potentially. And this is an opportunity. Doncaster are at home. We've already said defensively strong. They've only conceded 92 this season. And for them, I would go as far as to say it's unlikely that if it was going to be a tri-fest, it would be unlikely to see Doncaster winning it. But if it's a war of attrition, they could be right in with a shout here?
Yeah, they could, and I think that's the key when you're playing a team that's been so successful that they've got so many big wins. Is you've got to get them into an arm wrestle, you've got to get them into a battle, you've got to put them into a position that they've not been in at this moment in time. You've got to put them in a bit of a hole and see if they can climb their way out of that. At this moment in time, so far this season, London haven't been put in that position, so they've not been there. So at this moment, you don't know how they're going to react when they are put there. So the first, you can say this in any game that's out there, but the first 10, 15 minutes in this game, I think, is going to be significant. If London get off to a bit of a flying start and they get an early score or a couple of early scores and they get into that, they're relaxing, they're into the game again, they're into that free-flowing rugby. If it's 0-0 after 10 minutes or 15 minutes or Doncaster can snag a try and they're 6-0 up or 4-0 up, 15, 20 minutes into the game, then it's a completely different situation then. And then we'll see what London have got. Then we'll see how they respond to a little bit of adversity that they've not been in before. So that'll be key. The first sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes of the game, can Doncaster keep it tight? Can they nip a score and put London under some pressure? Then we'll see how they react.
Absolutely. We wish Doncaster well in that one. Oldham taking on Workington Town. Of course, Oldham a massive win over Hunslet in the 1895. Workington obviously had a week off. Seeing Oldham win here?
Yeah, I'd suggest so. I think the quality that they've got, the way that they're playing, they're on that roll now at this moment where they're picking up continuous wins and they've got that confidence and they've got that continuity and connectivity with their spine players and they're scoring a lot of points. So I think with how they've played recently, it'd be difficult to look any further than an Oldham win.
Rochdale against Dewsbury, maybe not as easy to call. Both side by side on the table. This has got a close one written over this one, surely.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why Dewsbury rested a few players last week in that cup game with one eye on this. Give some of their players who have played a lot of minutes this year a little bit of time off just to recover and recoup and get them ready for this week. Rochdale, real good win against us last week as well. So they'll be full of confidence and full of beans. So I think it's going to be a great game as this one. Yeah,
probably a toss of a coin job. Now, you're Sheffield hosting Salford. At the start of the season, people probably put this down as a Sheffield win. But, of course, your injuries are taking the toll. We know that. So that probably shortens this one considerably, I'd say. It's not a given, is it?
No, and no game is. And we've said that all the way through when we've been doing this, that if you turn up half-cocked, then you'll get what you deserve. And we're prepping as we do every single week, and we're having people in different positions and struggling to get people on the training field. But we'll prep as we always do, with the intention of giving the best version of ourselves, whoever's playing in what position. And I think it's difficult to prep against Salford because you don't know what you're going to come up against. You don't know loans wise, week on week, who's going to be there, who's not going to be there. So Salford's last game against Batley, I think they have 7 players in on loan and five from Warrington, I think, or a number from Warrington. Will they be there this week? Because Warrington have got a reserve team game. I don't know. It's a bit of a difficult one to sort of prep against Salford because week to week, as I say, they've got different players in different positions. Will they bring a few people in from North Wales? I know they signed Cole Oakley this week from North Wales. Will there be 1 or 2 more that'll jump in from North Wales? Will they get some more people in on loan?
There's some big experience in there. I mean, we talked about Greg Eden, we talked about Deck Patton. They've got some players down there, North Wales, haven't they? That could slide in.
Yeah, and they had a couple on loan from Oldham as well in the last game against Batley. Will they be there? We'll have to wait and see what the squad is when it's announced on Friday.
Yeah, that'd be good counsel. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they do snag a few. Some good players that have been playing down there at North Wales. So we'll keep an eye on that. Swinton take on Keighley. Of course, been a tough all year for Swinton. Keighley, let's be fair, mullered by London at the weekend. Keighley will be looking to get back on the horse here, won't they?
Yeah, they will, and I think this will be a game that both teams have potentially identified as one that they want to win, or one that they can win. I think maybe confidence-wise with Keighley in the league, I think they would have expected to go down to London and not win that game. But the previous week, getting a real good victory over North Wales. Salford been struggling so far this season, haven't they? So you would potentially just side towards Keighley, just with maybe a little bit more confidence in getting the victory this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Then Whitehaven Hunslet. This is a tough one to call.
Yeah.
This is a real tough one to call.
It is, yeah. Again, we go back to the squad availability. Aaron's still going to be able to get some players in. Again, everybody was struggling for players at the minute. They're probably going to be looking at the North Wales situation, seeing if there's any players that they can pick up and strengthen their squad. I'm not sure if Leeds have got a reserve team game this week or not. Will they get?
I know it is reserves this week, so I would expect.
Yeah, so we'll also get any players in from Leeds that they have been getting on the week off from reserves. As you said, they only managed to get 16 people on the field against Oldham. They'll be working hard behind the scenes to try and get some bodies in. So again, that's one of them. How many have they got? Who have they got? What sort of squad are they going to be able to put together for that game?
Yeah, but on paper it's a real tough one. And then finally, Widnes taking on Halifax. I think Leon Hayes has gone to Widnes. I saw that in the press. So I do know Leon's there, which is a good pickup. It's a good pickup. Be interested to see how Leon goes. But yeah, Widnes, of course, he was majestic for Salford when he went there the other week. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But yeah, Halifax. I mean, like I say, had a good knock against Barrow. They'll fancy it. Halifax, they will fancy it, won't they? But do you see Widnes coming through at home?
Again, it depends on squads, depends on teams, depends on availability. Will Halifax be out there in the market looking at player availability from North Wales? You know, that they're wanting to bring people in that are their own players that they can work for the rest of the season, rather than relying on week to week from Super League and from loans from other clubs. You know, so they'll be looking at strengthening and getting people in. So I think the next sort of 24 hours up until the registration, which is Thursday at 12 o'clock. You know, I think the next 24 hours could play a significant role and significant impact on what squad availability certain teams have this weekend.
It's all fun and games, mate, in the Championship, isn't it? It's all fun and games in the Championship. But no, some absolute belting games this weekend in the Championship. Like I say, the picks for me as we go down, I think Newcastle Barrow it's got a lot about it. We wish Doncaster well. I think it'd be just good for the division if that was a Donny win. I think it would give it a bit of spice, which wouldn't be a bad thing, quite frankly. I think Rochdale Dewsbury should be a belter. That Widnes Halifax game has got all the hallmarks of being a good one as well. So I say some really good tussles in there this weekend. We will, of course, be back next Wednesday and we'll find out what happened and who's where, and maybe we'll hear a bit more about what people have got planned for grassroots and Championship Rugby League in the future. And of course, we can discuss that. But look, mate, hope you get back on the horse. I'm sure you will. It won't be easy with the players that you're missing, but I'm sure you'll give it your best shot, and I'm sure it'll all work out fine in the end. On behalf of everybody, mate, thanks for squeezing us into your busy schedule. Won't be the same now without a bit of Craig on a Wednesday afternoon. Good to see you, mate. Go well at the weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Yes, pal. Thank you, mate.